This is the Guardians and Gladiators podcast, a Special Olympics-based show with your hosts, Lauzie and Coach.
Here we go, and welcome to this week's episode of Guardians and Gladiators. My name is Lauzie, and always with me is Coach. How you doing?
Excellent. Hello, Lauzie. Thanks for asking. How are you this week?
Good.
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 Are you going to come out to hockey tomorrow or in a couple days?
Yes.
Excellent.
No, that's...
Oh.
No.
No, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Right, because we're
Halloween. Yeah.
That's right. Anyways, we might as well just get right into it.
Yeah.
We have a special guest today.
Special guest. Welcome to the show, our Honorable Senator Jim Munson.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here with you, the two of you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You are a retired federal senator, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, I have been retired for 1 year now. Here I am at the age of 76, and the Constitution in this country says you have to retire at 75.
Have to.
But I do still retain the title Honorable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm still Jim Munson, or as my mother would call me, Jimmy Munson, or as my father would call me, a scamp. And I don't think titles really matter. I think what matters is who you are and what you do.
Exactly, for sure. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything, we do like to do one of our favorite segments, and that is Dad Joke of the Day.
Dad joke.
Dad joke, absolutely.
Are you ready?
Now, I was really trying to find a political one, but I couldn't really find any that were
Suitable?
family friendly, I would say. So, you know what? The other day, I saw a ghost.
Oh.
Really? You know that?
No.
I knew it was one as soon as it walked through the door.
That's good.
Oh, boy.
Especially around Halloween.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, yeah, there we go. That was kind of appropriate then there. Good stuff. Well, again, thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedule. Even retired, you were apparently a fairly busy man, so we do appreciate that.
Well, it's I always have time for Special Olympics from the get-go.
Yeah.
That will never end with retirement because we're off to the big gala in Toronto next month. I think it's the 18th of November, where thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars are raised for Special Olympics Canada.
Yep.
And it's wonderful to walk with all those celebrities and also some athletes and coaches.
Yep.
At the gala in Toronto on the 18th. And,
right.
And I stay busy across the country connecting with various chapters. And to me, to be on this particular program, this podcast, by the way, it's the first podcast I've ever been on.
Excellent.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's just kind of like a radio show.
Yeah.
More or less. But it's on the internet, so.
Right.
But no, that's great.
I was in, yeah, well, I way back in another career I had, I was in radio for 14 years.
Right.
It goes back to 1965
Okay.
to 1979. I was in radio before I got into television. And then I crossed the floor, as they would say, and got into politics.
Yes. Now, you did, like you said, you were like a journalist, right? Or you started as a disc jockey? Is that what it was, or?
Well, I started as everything.
Yeah.
I was 19 years old, and I went to a little radio station in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can believe it, in this day and age, I was paid a grand total of $36 a week.
Wow.
My room and board, or my room and breakfast, was $8 a week.
Whew.
And it was a 250-watt radio station called CJLS.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm 19, and I had left home. I went back to university later in life, but I wanted to be on my own, and that's how it all started.
Wow.
And so I had programs, and I read the news, and I did everything. I played a lot of senior hockey as well as a part-time thing in my life. But so it was radio, but I always had a dream.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just like Special Olympic athletes. They always have a dream about doing better. And I always thought that maybe one day if I work really hard, I could be a reporter on Parliament Hill. And so I ended up in another radio station where almost in the area where I grew up in northern New Brunswick and in Bathurst, New Brunswick. I'm from Campbellton, New Brunswick. And then moved to Montreal, and for the listeners here today or tonight, covered the FLQ crisis way back in the early 70s. Got to Ottawa, worked in radio. Then I joined CTV, National News, in 1979.
Yep.
And with that, very short story, 24 years in television, and I was based in London, England.
Okay.
Not London, Ontario, but London, England.
Yep.
And also based in China.
Wow.
Holy cow.
And then, and so I was overseas, and I covered a lot of tough issues like the massacre in Tiananmen Square, the Gulf War, various things. And then came back to Canada, and eventually ended up, and we can talk about that later if you want, but I ended up working for the Prime Minister of Canada.
Jean Chrétien, right?
Jean Chrétien, as his Director of Communications. And I never thought, Lauzie, that I would ever leave journalism, because we always thought that politics and politicians, we covered them, but going there would be working on the dark side. The other side. But, sometimes things happen in life, and I lost my job at the age of 55. Maybe I was too old then at CTV, but a few of us were let go, and that's the nature of the business. It changes.
Sure.
And I didn't know what I was going to do, Todd. And I ended up getting a call from the Prime Minister's office, and I will not do a Jean Chrétien accent, but he was my boss, and he was Jean Chrétien, and he would say, Jimmy. And so I ended up working for him for 2 years. And this story will bring us to Special Olympics, by the way, because after 2 years of working for him, he has the power to appoint people to the Senate. And he asked me, and he said, Jimmy, would you like to be a senator? And I said, yes, I would like to be a senator, because I knew that I'd have an opportunity to do the things I've always thought I wanted to do, and that was to work with people with intellectual disabilities in the world of inclusion, and it was and thus began my adventure in the Senate.
Right.
Day one with Special Olympics Canada.
Oh, nice.
That's my shortened version of of my story.
That's not bad.
So what do senators actually do?
Well, some take naps.
Seen that on CPAC a couple times.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm just joking about that. Senators really, they're hardworking souls who come from various backgrounds across the country, who are really passionate about some of the causes that they were involved in before they became senators. But in the scheme of things in Parliament, no law is passed in this country unless it goes through the Senate.
Right.
So when Lauzie asks, what do senators do? Let's say there's a bill on health care, improving it across this country. And there's a bill has been proposed, and it has to become law before you can spend money on a new program for Canadians. That bill, piece of legislation, has to go to the Senate of Canada. And in the Senate, they go through the same process of debating that bill before it becomes law, and they have the opportunity to improve it, to improve the legislation, to amend it, to make it better from their perspective. And so that's one thing that senators do. The other thing that senators do is that they end up because it's a place for minority rights. Traditionally, in the long ago, the Senate was there for the minority rights of the English rights and French rights in Canada. Well, it has evolved. So many senators, including myself, have taken up the causes that were important to them. So there's a lot of advocacy going on, and that's extremely important. And senators also do major studies. For example, a number of years ago, there was a study done on mental health. And senators came up with a proposal which is being used today on mental health in this country because it's a serious issue. Where I come into it as a senator is in the world of inclusion. And it was important for me to get involved with Special Olympics and other groups because I felt that their voices, the voices of those who didn't have a strong enough voice, were not being heard. So I took up that opportunity as a senator.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah.
There you go. So what was your primary drive to be part of Special Olympics, or what was the reasoning for going into that direction with your career?
Well, this is something very close to my heart, and it's personal and it's family. Way back in the late 60s when I was first married, my wife and I had a beautiful baby boy, and his name was Timothy James Alexander Munson. And when Timmy was born, he didn't show any signs of, well, he was just a normal little baby. But it was deduced that they used the terms in those days. It was just awful. They used the terms mongoloid, whatever. They weren't. But he was a Down syndrome baby. And Timmy only lived for 10 to 11 months. He didn't pass away because he had Down syndrome. By no means.
No, of course not.
He had bronchitis because he was susceptible to flus and so on and so forth. So when you're a young dad and a young mom and you have a child and you lose your child, it's devastating. There's sadness, but there's also anger, like, why me? And I always thought in my life, if I could ever do anything in my life that would honor his brief life, because I think we're all here for a reason, whether it's 10 months, 10 years, 100 years, we're here for a reason, then I would do something. And as time went on, and I just talked about my background working as a journalist overseas, I was in a lot of refugee camps in Cambodia and in the Middle East. And children were being adopted, but nobody was going to adopt a child with Down syndrome. Nobody was going to adopt a child with a physical disability. And I said, I can always tell their story, which I did. But if I can do more than just tell a story on CTV National News, I'll do that. And I got that opportunity, right? And I never expected to be. I thought I'd be a journalist all my life. But things happen in life, and you're challenged in life. And with that challenge, you only have one step you can take, and that is forward. Every time, the only step you can take is forward. So when Mr. Chrétien appointed me to the Senate, I thought, where can I move, and what organization could I be involved with that would help me fulfill my promise to my son, who would be in his early 50s now. And so I walked into the Special Olympics office in Toronto. Oh my goodness, it's 19, 20 years ago. And I told them my story, and it was an eureka moment in the sense of we can be partners in this, because Special Olympics at that time, they were getting funding, but they weren't getting proper funding. They weren't getting sustainable funding. People weren't believing that Special Olympics were a sports organization. This is not just, handing out some money for some people to play games and so on and so forth. I mean, Dr. Frank Hayden wouldn't have anything to do with that. But it was still difficult to get the government's attention, and there was funding.
For sure.
And so I decided that here's what I'm going to do. So thus this partnership began. and I began to talk it up. As you can see, I like to talk, and I especially like to talk about Special Olympics, and began to arrange meetings with some of the powers that be in government,
Yep.
and the powers that be in Special Olympics. And you can have all the games and have all the fun that we want to have, but behind the scenes there are people who are working so hard, in the bureaucracy to politicians. But the big champion for me, now can you imagine this? I worked with Liberal governments. I'm a Liberal senator.
Mm-hmm.
But the big champion for me through all of this was former Finance Minister Jim Flaherty,
Yep.
a Conservative minister.
Yep.
But he's the man with the money. He
Yep.
was a finance minister, and he was also a man with a heart, because one of his sons has an intellectual disability.
I didn't know that.
I met
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
I met him. And some lobbyists would say, well, how did you get into his door? I said, well, I'm on the 3rd floors to the center block in the Parliament buildings. He's on the 4th floor. His name is Jim. My name is Jim. He's a short guy. I'm a short guy. We're both originally from New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Let's chat. So I sat down with him, and he said, bring them in, the executives at that time. And they came, and I remember the day they came, because the minister was being challenged in the House of Commons in question period by the Liberals of the day, and he wasn't in a good mood. But when he came in and I told him my story and they told their story, he just said, put together a business plan.
Yep.
And thus was born the groundwork for sustainable funding, from my perspective, for Special Olympics. So I always hold a special spot in my heart for the late Jim Flaherty, for what he did. And I remember we have 2 boys now. One's name is Claude, and the other's name is Jamie. And we had a big Special Olympics day on the hill playing soccer.
Mm-hmm.
And my son, who was a soccer player, came to see his dad play with the Special Olympic athletes and parliamentarians, including Jim Flaherty.
Yeah.
And every time I touched the ball, my son kept yelling, "Go Jim! Go Jim! Jim! Go! Way to go, Jim!" And Jim Flaherty thought it was him that was cheering for Jim. But anyway, that's just a small story to show that color of politics, your political color doesn't matter.
No.
And so since that time until this day, and Liberal governments and whatever government's in power will not ever erase or bring down what is important funding besides all the sponsorship funding that that Special Olympics get. So that was part of the role that happens with us in politics.
That's good, because wasn't there, if I recall correctly, and I could be wrong, didn't they just recently increase funding for Special Olympics?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they sustained it, and there have been increases.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and on a national level, and it's proven. The arguments that we're making too, and Lauzie, and as you as coach would know that, it's not only the athletic ability of our athletes, it is their mental health, their physical health, their inclusion in society, the way, from getting jobs to getting married to doing whatever you're doing. There's the benefit. Jean Chrétien, when I worked for him, he said, I like what you're doing, and I like what you're thinking of you're going to do. And then when I was doing all those things as a senator, he said, I like what you're doing. He says, because you know what, Jimmy? When these people go to work, when people with an intellectual or physical disability go to work, guess what they're doing? They're making money. Yeah. Guess what that means? They're paying taxes.
Of course he'd say that.
Guess what that means?
Of course.
And guess what that means? That means that there's money for the government to operate. And you become, but the more egalitarian part of that is that you're part and parcel of society.
Yes.
You're not just trying to enter, look through a door saying, help me.
Yeah.
You're saying, look at me.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm on a playing field, not only in sport,
Yeah.
but I'm on a playing field when it comes to the society that we live in.
And it definitely shows that with like a lot of the athletes that I've talked to and have been around, the ones that are employed, they love it, even if it's in a volunteer position. Like some of them might not be have paying jobs, but they're out working and they're being included in a lot of stuff, and it's great.
Yeah,
for sure. Now, aside from the galas, what other kind of Special Olympics events have you been to? Like, have you been to any like the hometown games or the national or provincial games or anything like that?
Yeah, I've over the years I tell this story. There's a little town outside of Ottawa called a little place called Navan, and in fact, Ottawa is now encroaching on farmland and moving into a little village called Navan. Whoop. And then there's a big place called Nagano in Japan. And I say to people, I have been for Special Olympics from Navan to Nagano.
Yeah.
And I am as comfortable in Navan on a winter day for games in a cold arena.
Yeah.
It's now been torn down, but it was a barn.
Those cold barns.
And where Special Olympics, where there's figure skating going on and different things are taking place, as I am in the World Games that were in Nagano.
Yep.
And that so those have been some of the and I would follow and write about as well, since it was my past career as writing and speaking like this. Would tell stories as well about Special Olympics athletes that would end up in the Ottawa Citizen, or I remember one athlete who was a figure skater in Nagano, and he was ready to do his figure skating routine, but he came over to have a chat with me, and then and he was also hard of hearing, but he had a special audio set on where he was listening to music.
Yep.
And his coach came running over saying to him, you're on, you have to be on. Why are you sitting in the stands when you should be skating? And he looked at her and he said, every athlete needs a little downtime. Yeah, but he got out there and he curtsied in front of the Princess of Japan, and it was one of those moments where you look at, you can watch an NHL hockey game, you can watch a CFL football game, but there's no other place I'd rather be than seeing the pure aspect of sport.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I've been from Navan to Nagano. I've been to the World Games in Shanghai. I've been to World Games in Greece, and Winter Games in Austria.
Yep.
Many games in Ontario on cold winter days in various towns. And in fact, our national games in Thunder Bay was a real treat. I understand that Lauzie plays hockey.
Yep.
Yep.
Floor hockey.
Yeah.
I will never, ever again step onto a pod because it was a terrifying moment in my life.
You guys are crazy.
Even though...
Sometimes.
They're not not crazy. I mean, they're athletes who are just
they're intense.
All athletes are intense or crazy. Yeah,
yeah.
right.
And, that's what I mean.
And but you know what? One time I stepped on. I think one time it was a PEI, and I thought, hey, I'm 76 years old, but I'm still playing hockey, old timers hockey.
Yep.
And I played a pretty serious hockey when I was younger. But to step on, it's another special skill to step onto a pod and the intensity. But along with that intensity is kindness. And it's where I saw kindness at its best. As a senator, I introduced a bill, by the way, before I retired, which became law, introducing Kindness Week in Canada.
Yes.
where we and I think it's very important. But one of the and why do I do why did I do something like that? Well, it was in Nagano. I have to make sure I have this right. But there was a game against Cuba, and I think the men's team was there was a good team for a number of years from Peterborough. And they got older and older and older, and people get younger and younger. But this team from Cuba stepped on into the pod, and they had hardly any equipment. And it took everything for this Peterborough team to beat them that day, to win that game. And at the end of the game, all the extra equipment that the team had from Team Canada, everything, they gave it all to the Cubans.
Nice.
Yeah, and I if I have the country wrong, I apologize to those who are coming onto this podcast. They may say it's another team from South America, but I think it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, the team this team, their athleticism, their joy of being there, their participation. In fact, I think my favorite sport is of course, because I love hockey, is hockey.
Yeah.
I don't want to take anything away from anybody else because. I also love the idea that golf is part and parcel of Special Olympics now because I'm a golfer. I golfed yesterday at
I'm a golfer too.
24 degree.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what do you normally shoot?
What, like a couple over par?
Yeah.
Usually?
Mid
wow.
40s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
what I did yesterday.
On a 9-hole. Yeah.
9 holes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yesterday I had a 46, 45, hard to break 90.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah. We
Who? Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, who's the young woman, the athlete, the golfer?
The one in Niagara
The one
Falls,
that-
right?
Tess.
Tess, yeah.
Tess. Yes, Tess. Oh, she is a hero to me. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been trying to get her on. She's obviously like super busy with her golf, but
In other sports.
and other sports. Yeah, we did have Rick Buck Jr. on as well. He's the male, one of the high level
Top males.
Yeah. He's like sponsored by TaylorMade, and he's he's a fairly good golfer. He always joshes us back and forth when we're doing our golf tournaments. So
Yeah.
Wow. And with golf, there's so many other sports in all my travels. I think one of the great moments. I had worked in China as a reporter from 1987 to 1992, and during that time in very closed-in China, there would be nobody admitting that there were people with intellectual disabilities or whatever. It just was that kind of society.
Really?
Yet many years later, the World Games were held in Shanghai. And, because the pressure was on and you want to be part of the world, then you let your athletes out and let them participate with Special Olympics.
Yeah.
And there was, you'll love this story, I think, Jackie Barrett.
yeah.
Oh,
Remember
yes.
Jackie Barrett? The weightlifter?
From Newfoundland.
Well,
He's the moose.
Newfoundland.
I had him on the show. I had him on the show back in the first season. I got him on.
Did you?
Yeah.
Wow. What a guy, right?
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine his size and my size. When I had told him my story about our son one time in Halifax, he just gave me the biggest hug. He said, "I'm here for you,"
Nice.
And then, but in Shanghai, he had been living in Halifax at that time. And I know he's from Corner Brook in Newfoundland.
Yep.
Or as he would say, Newfoundland Labrador. And so these are the games. This is and I've never been at a weightlifting event, and it's very dynamic, right? And so they had the big crowd there. And I walked over to him, and I said, now remember, he's living in Halifax. He's a Newfoundlander, but he's living in Halifax in those days. So I walked over to him and I said, "Jackie, how are you feeling?" He said, "I'm feeling pretty good." He said, I said, "What?" He said, "What?" I said, "What is your main competition?" And he said, "It's China and Russia." And I said, "How do you feel about that?" He says, "What they don't know is that Halifax has come into town. and the next day, you know, I don't know if he broke a world record at that time. I seen him do it in Athens, and then I saw him in the Shanghai thing. And it was just one of these things where people were just screaming with delight. It was just because he's a showman, right, as well.
Is he?
He just won. The first one he misses.
Yeah.
And some people said, I think even his late mother said that he probably did it on purpose. But the next two were two straight lifts and just boom.
Yeah.
And he was there. So there are moments for me with I've seen they're just so many.
Yeah.
Right. I think that even just locally here of going to some of the fundraisers here in Ottawa, hearing a Special Olympic athlete sing "O Canada," hearing a Special Olympic athlete, giving their oath.
Yeah.
I think it's an oath that should be used by every athlete in the world. You know, let me win, but if I can't win, let me be brave in the attempt.
Yeah.
It's such a humble oath.
Yeah.
Because we have seen it, and I'm sure, Lauzie, you have seen it and I've seen it and stories have always been told about, somebody heading down on a track meet, and all of a sudden somebody goes by and just give him a wave, give him or her a wave. Okay, winning is not everything. I mean, it's nice to have medals, and and that's very good. But at the end of the day, I always tell people, well, what we have are family and friends, right? Yeah. And that's it. How do you describe richness? Well, it's in your heart. It's in what you do. It's in what Special Olympic athletes do. So every time, and why I was very excited about being asked to be on your podcast, Lauzie, is that I feel I have an opportunity to again spread the word again to around this country, because our sport is growing.
Yes.
Yeah,
if you
big
take
time.
a look at the numbers, you take a look at coaches like Todd here and others, and people being involved, and how much we're moving up, and taking a look at the health aspect of it all.
Yeah.
I'm always comfortable around. I'm always comfortable around Special Olympics. It's I think I found my home, and
Good.
76 is just a number. So when it comes to Special Olympics, I'm not retired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I just started.
Yeah. Well, I have found that out with a lot of the older volunteers, that they've been doing it for a very long time. Some of them longer than both Chris and I have been alive.
Yep.
So I mentioned to you before, I'm probably almost in year 2. And I'm head coach of the floor hockey team. I coach powerlifting.
Okay.
We just started volleyball in London, so I'm helping out with that. And in the summertime, I did track and field. So yeah, they hook you right in.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they do. And what I like about it, if you're, I love the divisioning part of our Special Olympics. That if people are listening to this podcast, that your expertise is based on your level of the competence you have in that particular sport.
Yep.
So when you division, that's what I've had to explain to a lot of people, that when somebody's in a track meet, well, if there's a group that's doing it, and I saw, gosh sakes, who's that gentleman from Toronto? I think 11 seconds. I mean, 100-yard dash.
Wow.
And there are others who can do it in their category between 20 and 30 seconds. And, but they have their categories, right? And it's wonderful to watch. It's great to be part of. And I'm thinking right now of the legacy, of Dr. Frank.
Yeah.
And Dr. Frank Hayden, to me is he's my ultimate hero. He offered me direction when I first got involved in Special Olympics about 20 years ago.
Oh, nice.
And everybody who has been running the organization, and including today's Sharon Bolenbach, these people are so committed to the lives of others. And when we talk, as I said at the beginning of our chat here today about inclusion, we mean inclusion not only in the field of sport. We mean inclusion in society.
Yeah.
We mean inclusion in working. We mean inclusion in having families. I'm hoping one day that, a Special Olympic athlete, could be a member of Parliament. Why not?
Yeah.
Why should any door be closed to an athlete with Special Olympics, and just being involved, continuing to be involved? And there's no better advocates than self-advocates.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, because from what I've read, you did have, while you were working, an assistant. Now, I don't know if that was while you were working in the Senate?
Yeah, in the Senate. Yeah. Well, Michael Trank. Michael's 34, and Michael has Down syndrome.
Yep.
And he and I have a friendship that's continued after my retirement. In fact, another senator has hired Michael, Senator Mary Coyle from Nova Scotia, and Michael worked with me, and Michael got paid.
Nice.
We had a program in the Senate called Friends of the Senate program.
Yep.
And a few senators, not enough. A number of MPs, again, not enough, have hired people with who are part of Special Olympics and also who have intellectual disabilities. Or I always like to say the ability to do things that we can't do. And special, to me, there are special abilities as opposed to disabilities. Sure. That's the way I like to look at it.
Yeah. That'd be pretty cool to do.
And so, and so with Michael, he got a paycheck, and I think Mike has more in the bank right now than I do. But he's such a loving soul, and Michael would come to me to all the Special Olympic fundraisers here in Ottawa, and would be part of it. We've gone to hockey games. I've never seen more animated movies in my life, and I love them now. I'm into it. In fact, when I travel worldwide, people are watching serious movies. I like to watch animation, all because of Mike.
Good influence.
Because it puts me into a place. Yeah. I'm happy. I understand this. I do.
Oh man, that's great.
So we've kept, and you know what Mike also brought to the Hill. He brought love to Parliament Hill. Yeah. He brought people out. For example, the security guards. Yep. Other people, the clerk, and the rest of it. And people were kind, and they stopped for a moment. They weren't in such a hurry. Yep. Because Michael was very happy to see you. And Michael and I also traveled to conferences, Down syndrome conference in Hamilton. We went to a conference in Winnipeg, and we told our story. Nice. And so by telling those stories and sharing them with others, I think it just gives so many people confidence that if you can work for a senator, you can work anywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there was a paycheck involved. Yeah. And that was, in terms of your self-esteem and who you are, that makes a difference. And in working in my office, not only taking letters and correspondence and doing things and adding things up, I would also and adding things up. I mean, adding all the items of the day that we had to do and part of my scheduling and so on. I would also include Michael in the conversations with some of the serious meetings I would have. Yep. So much so, I think one day when the Japanese ambassador came for a meeting, I had Michael sit in on the meeting.
Nice. And
this sensitized, I mean, the ambassador and his officials were just so moved by it.
Yeah.
They put it this way: there were a lot of Pokemon gifts that came on a little later on to Michael. So
Nice.
yeah, the added benefit is there, you know.
Yeah.
So to be able to hire somebody. Michael Trink, a guy like Michael Trink,
Yeah.
a very special person.
That's great. Yeah. There's a few athletes on my powerlifting team that have Down syndrome, and no offense, Chris, but they're some of my favorite athletes to work with.
That's fine.
Wow. Wow.
But no, that's good. No, it's good to hear that you keep in touch. So, you have more questions?
Yeah, I got some, I think.
All right.
What was like when you're working with Prime Minister Chrétien? What was like one of the biggest decisions like through his Liberal Party that you guys had to do?
Very good question, because one of the biggest decisions that he had to make was not to go to war in Iraq.
Yep.
The pressure, international pressure on Canada from the United States, Great Britain, and other countries for Canada to join this coalition. Mm-hmm. He wasn't prepared to take Canada into that war. And the political pressure was immense, both from within the Liberal Party and outside of the Conservative Party, because everybody was saying at that time there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and Saddam Hussein is a horrible guy, and he was. But he chose to keep Canada out of that war. So that to be in the room and to be part of council and being part of the discussion, to be there for that was an historic moment for our country. I think Prime Minister Chrétien will go down as a fondly and well-respected prime minister who the country felt pretty good about itself while he was in power, because he was an everyday guy who I think who understood everyday problems. So when it was dealing with the economy or separatism, I mean, he was pragmatic as a prime minister, and he was also lots of fun to work with. You know,
he seemed like he'd seem like he'd be a good guy outside of the house.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, who would you like to have a beer with after a hockey game with? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
Jean Chrétien. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're inclined to have a beer.
Yeah.
which I am
Going
from
back
time to
over the
time.
last few or handful of prime ministers, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, and it was just a delight to travel with, because to this day, at the age of 88, I mean, he's the only Canadian with that kind of historical and practical memory that goes back, you know, for a long time. If you take a look at a man who was a student at Laval University in his 20s, like 60 some odd years ago.
Yeah.
To the days of Premier Duplessis in Quebec, and he watched the whole growth of this country. I mean, this country is not that old,
Yeah.
and Monsieur Chrétien has lived probably half of the birth of this country. So,
Just about.
yeah, he's a very special person, a very down to earth guy, and also very kind. And it was always, to me, it was an honor. True honor and an opportunity that I never thought in my life I would have. So, you know, to get the opportunity to work with him and then to be appointed to the Senate, to do the things I've just talked about in this podcast.
Yep.
I am very grateful to the man to be able to have these three lives, you know, journalist,
Yep.
working for a politician, then becoming one.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you start with working with Chrétien, Prime Minister Krenchen?
That was around 2001 to 2002. Well, 20 years ago or so. Yeah, that's when I started working with him. And we travel. I traveled the world with him. I was responsible for the communications and the message that would come out of the Prime Minister's office. I had a great team I worked with, and the good thing about him that I find that you don't see in maybe in some politicians is that sometimes when you're in communications, you're supposed to be the person that tells the story that somebody else has created, whether it's policy, press release, or whatever. But with Mr. Chrétien, you're always in the room.
Right.
And you're always asked, your opinion may not have be shared with a particular policy or whatever, but many times it was.
Sure.
You're always in the room being asked your point of view and being part of it. So when they were shaping policy as a communications person, you did help shape policy.
Well, that's good.
So, yeah, I mean, it's rather an innovative thing called, sharing what you know, as opposed to saying, here's what I know, you don't know, just go tell them what I know.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And
took everybody's input.
Yeah, everybody's input into it. So,
Nice.
Yeah. So that was, it was wonderful working for Mr. Chrétien.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's it.
You good? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're two quick questions. We want to again respect your time. I know we probably went a little over, so
Sorry.
Oh no! look! I tell you, Todd and Lauzie, when it comes to this, and my wife is very much part of this partnership that we have with Special Olympics, and I think that those in the Special Olympics movement know my wife Jeanette because of our sharing our lives together, having this wonderful child who motivated both of us to be able to take that story and move it to a positive place as opposed to a place of sadness.
Yeah.
When I talked earlier about each of us having a reason for being here, I really believe in that. So when I said, when she asked me how long is this going to be, and I said, I don't know, 30 minutes could go longer. Well, it's gone longer. And why has it gone longer? Is that I care so much. I really care so much about the athletes. I can't wait to be, I'm going to do a sales job for myself right now. I can't wait to be invited to not participate, but just go to some games somewhere in this country, and just to watch people do what they do.
Well,
and that's what, and that's a message like I have to others who are just they should know if they don't know enough about Special Olympics, that everybody says they're in a hurry.
Yeah.
But on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday morning or any time, if you have an opportunity in this country to go to a Special Olympics event, whether it's weightlifting, golf or floor hockey, bowling, whatever you're doing, go do it.
Yeah.
And take a deep breath, and you'll walk out of that event, seeing something that is powerful, powerful emotionally, psychologically powerful, and you'll see something that you didn't think you'd ever see at a sporting event. Love. Love. Because that is the biggest thing that comes out for me is I get emotional about this, is the love of athletes have for each other. You know, because they train as hard as anybody else. And they want to win. But as we've said before, if you can't win, well, let's get on with something else. All right. And so this is the fabric of our country. If we're going to believe in the world of inclusion, then the starting point is Special Olympics. And because it's more than just sport, it's about our own humanity. and how we treat each other and ourselves and our families. Bottom line, that's it. Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, one of our goals for the hockey team is we want to get to the national games in Calgary. So
Yes.
will we see you
Okay.
there?
Yeah.
We'll give you an informal invitation
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
We'll keep in touch just to make sure that we do actually get there.
Right.
But yeah, that'd
well,
be good. But
I'd be honored to get there. I love, I appreciate that very, very much.
yeah, no worries. But yeah, like I'm sure there's got to be some hometown games up
Other
in Ottawa.
games.
Yeah, for sure. That
Yeah.
You can,
Well, I have to get in touch again too with my people here in Ottawa because, like you, Todd, I said I want to like to go back to the basics too. I like to maybe volunteer in terms of I've done the fundraisers and I've done the serious work in terms of working on federal funding, and I'm a big cheerleader and ambassador, I guess, for Special Olympics. But if I can get back on the ground, even helping out a certified coach, for example, in some of the sports that I enjoy, since I enjoy hockey, even if I was just changing the lines on a floor hockey would be fine by me. I'd like to get back into that. I think I have some. I have some expertise in terms of the love of sport, not expertise, but I love sport.
Yeah.
I just love sport completely.
Yeah, and just having that is good enough, because then you can go into any of the other sports and be part of that for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm there, and you have this podcast has helped spark little spark within me. I've the last few weeks has been a little tough for me. My sister passed away.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
So maybe I can do a younger sister, and you have to deal with these things. But I know that my sister Mary Munson, who would like me to stay positive, and so this has been the first spark.
Good.
Since her passing.
Excellent.
For me to get back into having a conversation other than sadness. and I think this has been powerful, very powerful for me to be part of your podcast.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, glad we can do that for you, at least. So.
Well, it's important. I appreciate it very much.
No worries. Any more questions? I have our last question that I ask everybody. Okay. I have one more question, and this is a question that we do ask everybody. Everybody gets asked this question. So, what's your preference? Chips or sweets?
Chips.
God. That's good. Nice. I have to go back and make a tally board. But so far, chips is by far the winner.
Yep.
Oh, hey, it's a go-to thing.
Yes.
But it depends. Because I'm from the Atlantic Maritimes. From the it could be some sea salt vinegar chips that my mouth begins to water when I start talking.
I got a whole cabinet full of them.
Yeah.
It's like,
I'd rather go there. You're driving on the highway. Oh, gee, I could stop and get a carrot stick or something, or some cucumber.
Yeah, right. You just reach
come
out. Yeah, no.
Chips, but it'll be a diet something with that. So yeah, chips.
Absolutely. A Coke Zero, right? Yeah, it's like chips and a Coke Zero. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, we should let you go again, Jim.
you.
We appreciate this so much that you were able to come out.
Yeah.
And
Thank
chat
you.
with us here. So if you ever are in the London area,
we're here.
feel free. Give me a jingle, whatever. You have my number now.
And stay in touch with me with if you have some games going on, and if I'm in that area. I have a son that's working in and around Hamilton, and he's a journalist, and so I need every reason to get into that part of the world. So these things could always work. Yeah,
that's like 45 minutes away. So
yeah,
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
again, thank you so much. We'll let you get back to your party downstairs.
Yep.
Right.
So
And besides, do you still have that garlic ice cream in London? There's a place that served garlic everything.
garlic everything. Well, there is a restaurant called Garlic's.
Maybe.
I don't know if they still do the garlic ice cream, but
I don't know. Yeah, everything that was there that was garlic was very, very good. But I do remember I was on an election campaign a long time ago, and I do remember there was garlic ice cream, unless it was a long campaign.
yeah, I don't think you'd want it after that. For sure. All right. Well, we're gonna do our outro, a little bit of music, and then we'll send her off.
Thanks.
So, Chris, we're ready to shut her down.
You ready?
All right, let's go.
Great to see you both.
Shut her down.
Until next week, folks, stay kind. Sorry, stay safe, be kind. Until next week, have a nice week.
Bye, everybody.